if you see this in you, be gentle with yourself. Know you came by this naturally. We just didn't give you what you needed, and your parents didn't get what they needed to do this for you. You can now, though, you can take like the Shameless book and literally walk yourself through your own development again and read yourself the books, the 2-year-old books, the preschool books, the kindergarten books, the second grade books. Read yourself those books and feel in your body. Listen with your body and ask yourself, what difference would it have made if I had somebody read this to me then?
That was Dr. Tina Schermer, and you've landed on the Me and My Health Up podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Harcher, your Well Concierge. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today I've brought Tina on the show for you to enhance your well-being in relation to shameless sexuality. Yes, shameless sexuality. We cover her background in terms of her research that she's done as in the psychology department in terms of teaching human sexuality and the misinformation that were fed in the 1980s and 90s that led to a period of creating shame around sexuality and then not knowing how to raise the next generation in relation to discovering their sexuality and helping them on their journey. So if you relate to this, and I certainly do, I was brought up in the 80s and 90s, you can really want to tune into this episode to hear Dr. Tina Sellers' insights on human sexuality. So without much further ado, I'd love to welcome you into the conversation I'm having with Dr. Tina Schermer Sellers. Welcome on the Me and My Health Up podcast. How are you, Dr. Tina?
I'm terrific. Thanks so much for having me, Anthony.
It's really great that you persisted. I remember the first time we had this session booked, I think you were not feeling the greatest. So we've got you back at your best. So I'm glad you hung in there and are going to delight the audience today with what you're about to share. But before we get really deep into the topic, I'd love you to share your backstory as to how you've arrived at what you're doing today.
I love this question in part because I love the way it invites me to look back and kind of weave the tapestry to where I am now. But I'm in my early 60s, and so there's a lot there in that tapestry. But where I am right this very moment is I support physicians, therapists who have gone on to study psychedelic-assisted therapy, in part because my career, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but has really led me to be very concerned with the impact of trauma on people's lives and their ability to live a liberated life, a life of not just wellness, but of joy and of inspiration, the sort of the in-spirit breathing through them kind of part of life. And trauma has a way of can kind of encapsulating you and holding you back. And I just think there's so much that is brilliant about humans and them living authentically who they exactly are and not being what culture tells them to be, not being anything else, and certainly not living in so much fear that they are afraid to live honestly through their heart, mind, soul, body, So that's where I am right now. I live on 8 acres in Oregon. We use our area to support clinicians or activists who are burned out, want to come and rest. Our place is there for that. And I'm very interested and very much into the research going on right now to help heal trauma. That all came about because I was 30 years as a professor in a marriage and family therapy program. I also worked in medicine and oncology and family practice. And I taught the graduate level human sexuality class. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, what? Well, if you're going to be a therapist, especially in Washington State where I was teaching at the time, you need a course in human sexuality, and one course is not going to be near enough. But what teaching that course for 25 years taught me is that I was beginning around the year 2000, I was seeing an increased number of graduate students who, when reflecting on what they learned about gender and sexuality and affection and expression, had so much fear and shame and lack of accurate information. And this was really causing profound troubles in their lives. And they were studying to be a therapist, right? And so I'm like, what happened? What did I miss in here? And I'm talking to these students and talking to my clients, like, I feel like I missed something. And what we eventually put together was I was hitting around 2000, the first wave of students, so 25 to 35-year-olds that got caught in the abstinence-only movement in the United States. That movement, most people may not know, but that movement was religious education, publicly funded in our public schools. And it was around the religious right and the moral majority actually running a front group for the growth of corporate capitalism in the US. And so it was sold to people as we're going to help return to family values, we're going to do all these things. But actually, it was really none of that. And it was just teaching people to be fearful and then taking their fear and using that fear to manipulate them to vote in particular ways or to do particular things. 1985, for example, the U.S. passed policies to remove regulations from our media. So any form of media that the public had access to, we now could do whatever we wanted. We no longer had to follow journalistic ethics. The only thing we were accountable to, those corporations, was making money for their stockholders that next quarter. This began in 85. Well, the whole abstinence only thing began in 80 and really peaked around 90. And so meanwhile, while we're withdrawing money for research on sexual health, withdrawing the sex education we did have, inserting religious education, or don't get, be so scared of sexuality, just be freaked out about it. And oh, by the way, here's social media, or here's the internet, here's video games that are selling women and all this weird information is coming in that is not grounded in anything. It's entertainment, right? It's not grounded in education or in knowledge, but that became our pseudo education for the public around sexual health. And yet many people found that as they used the information they were getting from media or from their friends, but really didn't know, it was manifesting in their adult relationships, their interpersonal and intimate relationships, not very successfully. Like people were having a hard time. They didn't know what they wanted. They didn't know how to talk about sexuality. They didn't know how to do it without feeling ashamed and getting scared and, all of that. And it kind of broke my heart, to be really honest. It broke my heart because I feel like knowing how to give love and receive love is one of the joys of being human. And to have shame interrupting that and telling us that we're not worthy somehow of it, to me, is like hurting people in their most tender, precious place. And so I kind of made it my mission to understand what had happened socially and politically, what had happened in people's lives, how you heal from it. And so my first book, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy, is really about what happened. How did this affect us? How do we heal if we've got this? And then how do we weave in a kind of spirituality and sexuality, whatever that means to us, in a way that feels good to us? And so that's really what that first book was, just to help people know it wasn't them. You're not alone. We culturally did this to you. Here's how you heal. You deserve more. And that's really what that book is. It kind of holds you and gives you the landscape to understand what had happened. Yeah. And then the next book I wrote really came out of hearing back from people who had been reading that book saying, I know what I don't want to do to my kids, but I don't know what to do. And I'm freaked out about not doing it right. And I said, I got you. I will write you a super practical book. It's going to be laid out birth to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, all the way up to 18. It's going to say, here's what kids are typically curious about. And here's what they're typically doing behaviorally, emotionally, whatever, so that you can recognize it. It's like I used to say when I was raising my own kids, you're fulfilling your job description. You're exactly acting like a 13-year-old. Congratulations. And, here's what we're going to do about that, whatever. But so I kind of lay it out. And then I'm like, here's the leading books for kiddos this age. Here's the leading books for parents this age. And here are some things I'd invite you to think about so that you can get rid of the shame that you might be feeling because somebody didn't know how to give you what you needed when you were 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever, all the ages up. And it's really there to help parents heal, help people heal who know they didn't get what they needed. I'm like, well, talk to your inner 2-year-old. Here's what you do. Talk to your inner 4-year-old. Here's what you do. And you can really literally heal and give yourself what you didn't get. But we've been scaring people around sexuality and making it a shameful thing for a very, very, very long time. But we took whatever was going well, like some education that we did have, and we got rid of that in, almost 45 years ago now. So we're into our second generation of people that really have been traumatized around their sexual development. So yeah, that's kind of how I got here, was really listening to my heart and saying, people deserve better. Is there anything I can do?
Fantastic. What a story. I can relate to your story through, I guess, my journey around nutrition and what was taught to me. So I'm a fully degree qualified nutritionist, and I reflect back on that degree now and realize how much misinformation there was, how much information was withheld, and how much was, I guess, driven to, I guess, manipulate us. Very similar to sexual education, as you were sharing in the 1980s. And I grew up in the 1980s and 1990s. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I'm that generation of parent that's trying to raise my kids the best I can based on an upbringing that wasn't so open, I guess. So just in terms of, I'd like to start with I guess the people my age, which is very much the listeners of this podcast.
Yeah.
How do they move forward around any shame that's associated with this abstinence that was created and fed to us and made us feel bad? And we've been carrying that and probably still carrying it with us today. What's the starting point?
Yeah, I love that question. It's a great question. Well, I think I want to start by answering it by just defining for you and your audience what sexual shame is, right? We know from the beautiful work of Brene Brown a little bit about what shame's about, right? But sexual shame is a particular kind of shame. And unless you grow up with caregivers or parents that are really comfortable with child development and kids' explorations, how they're going to explore, likely you were shamed. And we can get shamed as early as 10, 11 months old when we're getting our diapers changed or we're in the tub and we find our genitals. Like that is, I always say that's the best day in a little one's life, because you're like, oh my God, this is attached to my body. Yay. But there usually isn't somebody there. At least it's like at least 95% of families in the US for sure are not prepared, right? They have their own fear around that because somebody yelled at them. And so what happens is they go, yuck, gross, don't, that's dirty. They slap their hand away or something like that, as opposed to, yeah, dude, that's your penis. It's a great part of you, just like your nose and your ears and your, or whatever, that's your vulva. It's a wonderful part. And just name it, because that's what kids are needing at that age, right? They're needing things named. But very few kids get that, what I call 101-minute conversations over their lifetime, where they're just being given exactly what they need for their developmental age right then, right? So let me read to you this definition. And I'll say that we did not have research to provide for us an operational definition of sexual shame until 2017, right? So about 9 years ago now. We've been dealing with this for generations. We didn't even have an operational definition. So this is what that is. Sexual shame is a visceral feeling, meaning it's in your body. And it's in your body because it starts pre-verbally, okay? When all of our understanding is bodied, it's from our right brain and it goes into our body, through our amygdala into our body. Visceral feeling of humiliation and disgust toward one's own body and identity as a sexual being, and a belief of being abnormal, inferior, and unworthy. So deep down in my core, that's what I feel, because these curiosities that I express, I keep getting in trouble for them. And the only meaning I can make is, because I don't know why, is that something must be wrong with me fundamentally. This feeling can be internalized, but it also manifests, or often begins manifesting, in interpersonal relationships, right? From that infant and the caregiver, and then the toddler and the caregiver, the preschooler and the teacher. It's like this. Interpersonal relationships having a negative impact on trust, communication, and physical and emotional intimacy. So that's what I mean. It's hitting you at these very core places of where we build close interpersonal bonded relationships. That's where we're hurting people. Sexual shame develops across the lifespan in interactions with interpersonal relationships, as I just said, but then one's culture and society lays its layer on top, right? Like, for example, we know in the US, 50% of 6-year-old girls, 2/3 of 9-year-old girls, 90% of 15-year-old girls are modifying their diets already because they have learned they're not okay. Their bodies are not okay. And that's coming from culture. A lot of culture is telling them they're not okay. Little boys are getting these messages too. And then it creates a subsequent critical self appraisal. So that combination of what happens to me interpersonally and then what culture's telling me gets going a feedback, a critical feedback loop inside my head that can attack me for the rest of my life unless I do something about it to say, wait a minute here. Right? There is also a fear and uncertainty related to one's power or right to make decisions, including safety decisions related to sexual encounters, along with an internalized judgment toward one's own sexual desire. What this looks like is Peggy Ornstein wrote a book called Girls and Sex, and then about 5 years later, she wrote one called Boys and Sex. And in Girls and both of them actually, but in Girls and Sex, she interviewed about 80 girls, 15 to 22, and she was like, tell me what it's like being this age now and whatever. So they get talking about dating and all of that. And what she find out is that these girls could talk about themselves as being confident and competent. They know what they like, all this until they get ready to go out. And then they're putting down 3, 4, and 5 shots of hard liquor because they don't know if they can keep themselves safe or if they have the right to. This is how prevalent sexual shame is in our culture. Like, we breed it in our culture. And that's part of why we have a rape culture, is that we don't hold boys accountable. We don't teach anybody about boundaries and consent and all of these kinds of things. We're basically throwing kids out to the wolves, right? To media. And then exploitation happens because we run our economy on exploitation, right? I'm getting you to think you need something, right? I'm going to manipulate you to think you need something because then I can keep this company going, whatever the deal is. So this is really a profound thing. And so if you recognize as a listener that this is in you somewhere, I want you to know you came by it naturally. I'm really sorry. We haven't made it a priority to give you comprehensive, what we call life education, sexual education, but relationship education, how to do conflict, how to know what boundaries are, how to know what you like and what you don't like, how to stand up for yourself, how to get help. These are all the things that we need to know in order to do relationships well. We don't privilege that. And we don't make that a priority. We make getting you into this school or having you go into this career, we make that a priority. And yet those things aren't going to make you happy. They're going to make you comfortable and knowledgeable, but they're not going to make you happy. What makes us happy is how well we do our interpersonal relationships. We know this from the Harvard 85-year study that people who privilege good relationships, right, they're happier. They also live longer. Right. And so this is kind of where that is. So I'm often saying to people, if you see this in you, be gentle with yourself. Know you came by this naturally. We just didn't give you what you needed, and your parents didn't get what they needed to do this for you. You can now, though, you can take like the Shameless book and literally walk yourself through your own development again and read yourself the books, the 2-year-old books, the preschool books, the kindergarten books, the second grade books. Read yourself those books and feel in your body. Listen with your body and ask yourself, what difference would it have made if I had somebody read this to me then? And if it's hard to connect with that, get out the pictures of you when you were 8 and 10 and 12 and 15 and put them right there in front of you and just like read to that part of you, because you came by it. You came by your shame, your sexual shame naturally, but you can also heal it. And you can heal it by giving yourself what you didn't get and then practicing how to talk about this with others. And so in the Sex, God, and Conservative Church book, I developed a model called Healing the Mess, the model for erasing sexual shame. And I say it's 4 things. It's not linear, it's circular, but it's frame, name, claim, and aim. So frame is get yourself a scaffolding of sex education. That's what that book will do. It'll give you the scaffolding. That will make you feel a lot better. Like you'll feel informed and you'll be like, oh, that's where I learned that. Or, oh, things will get clear for you. Name is tell your story. Tell your story. Get together a group of people who grew up similarly to you and be like, what was it like in your home? How did you learn about discipline or conflict or affection or gender or sexuality or touch or safe touch or hurtful touch? I mean, how did you learn? And share your stories, because what you're going to find is you're not alone. I mean, you are so not alone, So share that story, and that's sort of naming your history, and then claiming your body is good. If you get up in the morning and you're like all put together, I mean, like your arms are all attached and nothing's in significant pain, it's a good day already, and it's a good body. And your body is, I think of it as the pen that writes the poetry of your life, right? And so if you get up and your pen's still writing, it's a good body. But I know that people have gotten messages over time that says that their body isn't enough. And that's baloney. It's the way, again, it has everything to do with economics and not in market, and not about you as seeing yourself as valuable. And I love the fact that we have diverse bodies, and all kinds of bodies, and with all kinds of abilities. And that is actually something that is there to help us all learn to appreciate the beauty in the human condition. Like, I live in a forest, and I'm glad there isn't just one tree out there. I'm glad there's all kinds of things out there. It's wonderful to marvel at and to learn from. And so that's claim. And when we teach ourselves frame, and when we tell our stories and find out we're not alone, and we name, and when we claim our body is good and we practice those things, what we're going to slowly notice is that we are aiming for a brand new legacy for ourselves and anyone that gets to know us. And that is work worth doing, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And I really, you spelled it out really well in terms of framing it up, sharing the context of how people would have been brought up around sexuality, and then what to do in terms of a framework to move forward and to really, I guess, embrace your body as it is and go and take that to the world. So I love what you shared. So just now, like, given that we've helped, I guess, pull the pieces together for the 30 to 60-year-olds. But now they're raising younger children, and as your second book does, help them now educate them with all the information and around sexuality. How do, because we have listeners here in their 30s that would have young infants or thinking about having young children. So if you could just take us through those age groups that you mentioned before, and how to, I guess, nurture a good upbringing around sexuality.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, throw out any idea, any inkling of idea you might still have that is just a talk. There's no such thing as one talk, because if you're doing one talk, it's too little too late. No, it's actually too much too late, because usually parents are going on and on and on, and the kid is glassed over and is like, okay, you can stop now. That has not ever been effective for anyone. I don't know if I've met anyone who had one talk and that was all that they got, and they thought that was enough. Understand that kids developmentally have different needs at different ages and different things they can handle, and you're giving them just what they need at that age. And if you're not sure, and again, Shameless Parenting will literally hold your hand and point you towards other books to read, and you're not going to you just have to do it. And I always say, just be one chapter ahead of your kid, be 2 years ahead of your kid. That's it. And I'll help you with the rest of it. But as we do that, then we're going to be giving them 100 1-minute conversations. It's going to be kind of know what to be paying attention to at the different ages, I don't know, by the time they're 4, they're going to have figured out just about that age that, okay, I tend to get in trouble, or somebody doesn't like it when I touch myself out in the living room, right? Or maybe I've had really positive parents, and they've said, well, honey, I love that you love that part of your body, and I'm going to remind you that you can use the bathroom or your bedroom, and that we all do that. That's privacy, and we do that. And they've been that way. But you finally, about 3 or 4, they start to make that choice for themselves
Mm.
because cognitively they weren't really there with all of that by then and or until then. And so it's really kind of knowing the things that are going to come up at the different ages. And like 5-year-olds, we came from the idea of playing doctor. That's
Yeah.
developmentally on track, right? Because kids have got themselves figured out by 5 or 6, but they want to know what's different about you,
Yeah.
right? And so they're curious about that stuff. So when you walk in, and this is part of what I invite parents to think about, imagine walking in on your kids. How do you want to respond? Do you want to respond with your fear and your shame, or do you want to respond differently? And I often say, if you feel like you got caught, like, and you need to respond and you do not know what to do, I'm like, here's your hint. Put a smile on your face, like relax your face and just be curious. Just be like, no, don't get freaked out. Just be kind of like, oh, look at you. Tell me what's going on here. Like, again, welcoming and loving, because try to remember that this is all coming from a place of innocence and curiosity. They don't know as much as you. They're not going to know as much as you until they're your age. So, like, this is not, I mean, when kids are touching themselves, I'm like, this is not masturbation for the intent of reaching arousal and orgasm. This is comfort, right? It feels good, and pleasure. It's comfort and pleasure. And we are hardwired for connection and pleasure. We come out of the womb seeking the breast, even though the milk's not there. We're like rooting for it, right? And that's because we can smell. And this is where we know comfort is, right? Connection and pleasure. Walk down the halls of an Alzheimer's unit. People don't have memory, but they're still seeking connection and pleasure. It's human. And so when kids have found that part of their body, they're like, it's comforting. It feels good. It's pleasurable. Of course it is, sweetheart. That's one of the wonderful things about being human. And we touch ourselves in private. Everybody does. Big people do and the younger people do. We all do. And that's what we learn to do. And this is part of teaching social norms, right? We teach them not to eat their boogers, right? Go get a Kleenex. Let's do that. I mean, it's just the same thing. But because sexuality, bodies, and desire got so loaded for generations upon generations, it's hard for our insides to relax when that happens. So I'm like, just take a deep breath, put your hand on your heart, put a happy face on, and be like, huh. Or they ask a question. What a great question. I'm not sure I know exactly what you want to know. Can you tell me any more? Like, go ahead, buy yourself some time, say something like that, or are you wanting to know about this or this? Just, help me know. And you don't have to give them any more than their little age, whatever it is, can handle. So, yeah. And that book will help you. I know in the US, when the 80s happened and we really moved towards capitalism and making money, I mean, that really became the forefront of politics and everything, even though they tried to sell it as other things. What ended up sliding into the background of things like child development books were very common in the 60s and 70s, and they became almost off the shelves. So a lot of people who had children didn't have anybody who understood them, and they don't understand their kids, and they get frustrated, understandably, that their 3-year-old does not act like a 30-year-old. Well, they never were going to act like that, but again, the parents need some nurturing around that too, which is kind of why I wrote the Shameless book the way I did, because I'm trying to help heal the parents so that they can really
Mm.
enjoy their child's innocence, as they're growing up.
Yeah, because it's so important that the adult makes progress. Otherwise, they sort of project their shame and their fears onto their children, and so
Mhm.
it's sort of a tango together, really. Ultimately, for these parents that were raised in that 80s and 90s, to
Yes.
really understand what they went through and how to overcome that, and then to raise a generation free of it is a dance together, isn't it?
It's a real dance together. And that's why I'll often say to people, like, if you can feel the part of you that like goes, I don't know what to do. Like you just feel this like inside kind of, just put your hand on your heart and be like, all that is, it's just telling me that when I had that question or was in that place, the people who loved me very much didn't know how to give me what I needed. I'm good. I'm okay. It's okay to feel that. And I can learn some things that will help dissipate this fear that I have. and I've walked with lots of people who are doing it different for their own kids than was done for them. And it's this dance of like getting scared, calming themselves, learning something, going back and saying, I love that you had that question. Can we talk about that some more? Like this, it's this real thing. But they come back to me so many times and they're like, it's so fun to learn alongside my kid and to bring a curiosity and love and support to their curiosity, to their stuff. And also to remember that they're 13 or they're 15 and I remember being those ages. I thought I knew it all, or I thought whatever, of course, and so just bringing more gentleness to themselves and to their children makes much more space for joy, and memories that you're happy to have later when they're grown.
Because they're really healing themselves in that process too, aren't they?
Right.
Ultimately, yeah, they're overwriting what they, saw as negative or shameful or that holding resents. They override it through seeing their child themselves experience the freedom and what they wanted. You get what I mean? Like, so it's very much
Yeah.
that.
And there, I think, is that sense as they look like as they have that experience with their kid,
Mm,
it reflects back into their own story. And they're like, oh, this feels good. Like
mm,
it's okay that I didn't get that, or I wish I would have
mm,
gotten. That's fine. But everybody was doing the best they could. I'm
mm,
doing the best I can
mm.
even right now. But doing this little different with my kiddos is helping heal something in me too. And that's
Yeah.
lovely. It's beautiful.
It's like they're overwriting that tape, or that, the memory, in
Yeah.
essence, with a new experience with their child. And it's really liberating to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's neurobiologically rewriting things. Like
Yeah.
literally you are healing your brain. You're healing your insides. It's real.
Um, is there a particular client story? Because you work with both therapists and, you're helping clients or patients on their own journey. Is there a particular story that stands out to you in, all the 30 years that you've been out there that you'd like to share?
Yeah. One of my favorite stories, and there were many, many stories of things that didn't go well, right? Many stories of abuse in the home because there wasn't appropriate supervision. You've got lots of kids, and some kids are more than 18 months older than others, and there's just not adequate supervision. And so the curiosity of the 13-year-old is played out on the 8-year-old. There were many of those stories. And parents even not understanding or not even be able to figure out how to have the resources so that the little ones and the big ones aren't responsible for the little ones, right? Because that just puts them in a precarious place. But I remember this one time having this story from this grad student, a young woman. She was telling me that she said, I had 4 sisters and my mom was a nurse. And we learned that one of the ways to get extra time with mom all by ourselves was to tell her that we had like kind of an important question to ask her that was a little embarrassing. And then at nighttime, she'd come and she'd just be with us and then we could tell him the thing. And so we all tried to think of yet another thing to get mom to ourselves, right? And so it ended up being that mom became this incredible life, relationship, sexuality, educator to her daughters because they would figure out how to get her in there. And so she was like, I had so many conversations with my mom through grade school, junior high, high school, that when I was in high school and she said I was a dancer. So I got to know my body. I was so not interested in boys because I already knew what kind of people I really liked, and not very many of those were boys at that point. And so then when she went to college, it was in college where she met who became her husband. They dated for a very long time, but she said we also had a much more unusual relationship than anybody else because I had learned all this stuff and I was sharing all of this stuff with him. We really decided to be incredibly intentional about how we did touch in our relationship and why. And she said, we made a decision which was not made by anybody that I knew. She said, we made a decision because they were a heterosexual couple, to put intercourse on the shelf, not for religious reasons, but because we knew that it was organizing to heterosexuals. And we wanted a relationship that was filled with diversity in our intimate life, like all kinds of ways of actually making love to each other. And so we kept it on the shelf for years before we took it off. She goes, now we've been married 10 years. We have 2 kids. I think we have the best relationship of anybody I know. And that is such a beautiful story of exactly what the research says, that when kids are given comprehensive, safe sex and life education, around relationships and all the things, boundaries, consent, all of it, that they get involved with sex later. They make safer sexual choices when they do decide to become sexually active. They end up choosing people that honor them more, that they feel more loved by and cared for by. And they describe having better sexual relationships in their adult lives. And also we have lower STIs, lower teen pregnancy. We have all of those stats are there. And so this is what comprehensive sex education does. It is the most important way to protect your child from exploitation and from being able to discern who is worthy of them, friend or otherwise, and maybe who is not right yet, right? And you might want to say, have a little bit more distance with them. And this is what America gets so wrong, is the whole thing about sex being dangerous is you don't tell them anything. And I always liken that to, okay, so I'm not going to tell them anything about cars. I'm just going to tell it's really fun to drive. I'm going to kind of shame them when they want to learn about it, right? But when they're 16, I'm going to hand them keys to a car and I'm going to say, you're ready to drive on the freeway. And that's baloney. We don't do that in any area, but we do that around sexual and relational health and wellness. Makes no sense.
Totally. It really does. It's a bit scary having someone on the road without any learning experience. So yeah, that just doesn't
Right.
happen. Yeah, yeah.
No.
It's
And
dangerous.
it's even more important than driving a car, right? It's
Mm,
really about how we give and receive love, which at the end
mm,
of the day is the thing we're going to care about the most.
mm,
When we're on our deathbed, I've done it. I've worked with people in oncology. They're not talking about the work they did. They're talking about their relationships that they had
mm.
and either the regret they have about it or how grateful they are.
Yeah, wow, wow. Yeah, so I really like that story that you shared because it's about that steady incremental progress at their own pace, as opposed to going from zero or as you said, no experience to having the car keys, and it's like from zero to hero sort of extremes, which yeah could be quite dangerous or not safe. And I think we grow a whole lot better when we just have that incremental journey, that progressive journey at our own pace. And
Yes.
that's what was shared in that story, is that they actually discussed what was feeling good for them and maybe a little bit nervous, but it's not too much nervous, and they grow
Yes.
together in that experience. So it was beautiful.
Yeah. 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 And the mom really set that up as the example, right? She would hear their question and answered kind of just what they needed right then
Mm.
and right then and right then and right then. It's that 101-minute
Yeah,
conversation. So,
I love it. I love it. So, yeah, I really appreciate you sharing these insights. Have been really valuable, not only to myself, but of course, the listeners, that this will be shared to so many people, which I encourage the listeners to share it with others that that are also struggling with this journey in terms of yourself or raising kids around, I guess a much more uh, informed education around sex.
right.
There's obviously curiosity from the listener that you've generated, and they want to know more. They want to get into the details, the nitty gritty. So, how can they, I guess, connect with you and locate your books?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Tina. So Dr. Tina Shameless. And I'm there. You can DM me if you have questions about something. And I have some resources that are on there. So just feel free. I also have a website that is just my name, tinaschermersellers.com. And there you'll also find resources and things you can download and look at and whatever. And then the book, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy, that can be found on Amazon. Or if you're not doing the Amazon thing, which I totally respect, you just take the title to your local bookseller and ask them to get it for you. And the other book, Shameless Parenting, Everything You Need to Raise Shame-Free, Confident Kids and Heal Your Shame Too. do the same thing. It's on Amazon, but you can also get it at a bookseller if you just take them the title and they can get it for you. I will also say for your listeners, if there's anybody out there that is really committed to doing this work and healing this aspect of themselves, and they just aren't in a place where they can afford the book, either one of the books, all you need to do is DM me and tell me that, and I will send you a promo code to a free audio version of either one of the books. I don't want people to really want to do the work and feel like they can't get access to the material. So I'll make it available to you. If you can't afford it, great. That helps me too. But if you can't, don't let that stop you, because I think, and this probably is not surprising to your listeners at this point to hear me say this, but I really think to heal this aspect of your body is one of the most, or your heart and soul is one of the most important things that you can do.
100%.
And I love it when people do that, and I love to support them doing that.
Yeah. It's going to help them, at that end of life, not having the regrets or remorse or carrying
Right.
resentment through their whole life. They can
Yeah.
feel liberated.
Right. If people want to learn about the work I'm doing around psychedelics and with clinicians, in the United States and around the globe, they can go to Inanna Rising, so INANNARISING.org, and you can learn all about us there. And we have a very small little Instagram that is Inanna_rising_PAT, which stands for psychedelic assisted therapy. But yeah, you can learn a little bit about us there. Also, BlackberryRetreat.com is our retreat center that we have here for restoring yourself and resourcing yourself in the woods. So yeah, people can
Nice.
learn all about me. I'm out there.
And I'll include all those links in the show notes, listeners. So yeah, just go to the show notes and click on the link that's most relevant to you. I just want to say once again, Dr. Tina, thank you so much for your time and sharing such great, wonderful insights on this very taboo subject from the 80s and 90s that you're now changing today. So thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for having me, Anthony.
You're welcome. And to the listeners, thank you for tuning in to another insightful episode of Health Up. Please share it with others that could also benefit from hearing Dr. Tina's wisdom on this subject that hasn't been spoken about for many generations. So please share it far and wide so that we can get the information across and overwrite that misinformation. So thank you once again for listening, and thank you, Dr. Tina.
Thank you.
Podcast disclaimer. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it do not constitute medical, healthcare, or professional advice and are provided for general information purposes only. All care is taken in the preparation of the information in this podcast. Connected Wellness Proprietary Limited, operating under the brand me&my Health Up, does not make any representations or give any warranties about its accuracy, reliability, completeness, or suitability for any particular purpose. This podcast and any information, advice, opinions, or statements within it are not to be used as a substitute for professional, medical, psychological, psychiatric, or any other mental health care or healthcare in general. me&my Health Up recommends you seek the advice of a doctor or qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Inform your doctor of any changes that you may to your lifestyle and discuss these with your doctor. Do not disregard medical advice or delay visiting a medical professional because of something you hear in this podcast. This podcast has been carefully prepared on the basis of current information. Changes in circumstances after publication may affect the accuracy of this information. To the maximum extent permitted by the law, me&my Health Up disclaims any such representations or warranties to the completeness, accuracy, merchantability, or fitness for purpose of this podcast and will not be liable for any expenses, losses, damages incurred, indirect or consequential damages or costs that may be incurred as a result of the information being inaccurate or incomplete in any way and for any reason. No part of this podcast can be reproduced, redistributed, published, copied, or duplicated in a form without prior permission of me&my Health Up.